countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, it's now time for more of the Last Comic Shop!
That's right. We're opening up the store for newbies to help them find their way underneath the comic book tent.
And we're keeping the lights on for the oldies, because they're the only ones that are going to care about the book we talk about today.
Oh, wow! Shots over the bow to start. There have to be some newer legion of superhero fans out there. I mean, it can't be all just folks that remember, like, I don't know, the 70s and the 80s. And maybe it is. I don't know, but I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson, and I'm joined by Jay Scott and Chad Smith, and we are covering a Legion of Superheroes comic book today. Yay! It's another DC classic. It's actually Chad's pick. Chad, yes! I asked Chad, I said, you have a DC pick for this month, and he was like, oh, why don't we read the Great Darkness Saga? And I was like, I've never read any Legion of Superheroes. Well, I that's a lie. I've read some Silver Age stuff for, shits and giggles. But, I don't know. It's kind of weird to think of, I don't know, your superheroes being called Bounce Boy or Lightning Lass or Chad Lad.
It's Matter Eater Chad. I told you already. Matter Eater Chad. One of my very multiversal variations. But no, with Legion, I always hear older fans talk about how great Legion is. And it's one of those books that I never got into. And I was like, I've been sitting on this Great Darkness Saga and found in the dollar bins for years now. I was like, we should read it. And we did. And that's over. But we'll talk more about it later.
Yeah, that's right. Well, for the opening segment of today's program, we're actually going to talk about some other things in the comic book world. A couple weeks ago, they released the list of those folks that are going to be inducted or potentially inducted into the Eisner Hall of Fame. Just like, there's a football Hall of Fame and a baseball Hall of Fame. The Eisner Hall of Fame really does celebrate those comic book artists and writers and creators and folks in the industry that really made a difference and should be enshrined someplace. So every year they induct certain folks into this Hall of Fame. It's a very prestigious honor. And today we're finally going to talk about not only those ones that are a shoo-in to get in, they're called the judges' choices, but we're also going to talk about the nominees that basically, I think, 4 are going to be selected, Chad, from this list that they have?
Yeah, so they have 17 potential nominees. There's a 2-step voting process, which the deadline was back in May. And that number is 4 that will go in and join the already pre-selected members to become part of the Eisner Hall of Fame.
Yes. So we are going to, on this show, not only go over who was nominated, but also real quickly give our choices for who we would induct if we happen to be awesome judges instead of just folks with a rinky-dink podcast. So, J.A., why don't you give us who the judges' choices are first? These are the people that are going to get in regardless, and then we'll go to those nominees.
Sure. So we've got EC founder and publisher Max Gaines, who devised the first 4-color saddle-stitched newsprint comic in the 30s. Oh,
not as famous as his son, Bill Gaines. Who actually did all the EC horror and sci-fi and had to appear in a Senate court hearing on juvenile delinquency in comics and all that. But Max, his dad, who had the Bible comics that Bill kept on saying, oh, yeah, we got Bible comics.
The educational comics of the E and the C.
Exactly. Who else we got, J.A.?
Legendary Marvel Comics editor Mark Grunwald.
Oh, my Squadron Supreme rises again.
There you go. What was Owen Wilson's character in Loki?
Is that the What If? No, what is that story where everyone is Mark Grunwald?
It's Mobius.
Oh, right, it's Mobius, but everyone, not just one character. Everyone is the same, right? They all look like Mark Grunwald.
Yeah, that's the guy they're based off of, because he was the guy that knew and kept everything in line at Marvel.
Yeah, he wrote the handbook to the Marvel Universe, which actually was a good idea at the time.
So then we have two pioneers of the comic book medium, British illustrator Marie Duval, who co-created in 1867 the British cartoon character Ali Sloper, which is considered the first reoccurring cartoon character, and cartoonist Rose O'Neill, who created the Cupies in 1912. And finally, two living legends, Filipino-American artist Alex Nino, who worked for DC, Marvel, Heavy Metal, and artist P. Craig Russell, which we've covered numerous books that he's done, Norse mythology.
And he also was on that Doctor Strange book that we. So if you want to go back and listen to our Doctor Strange review, you can get some more P. Craig Russell. So who were the nominees?
So now I'm just going to read off the nominees. I won't say, what they're known for, and you guys can pick out some of the names that jump out to you and, elaborate a bit on them. But the 17 nominees are Howard Chaykin, Jerry Conway, Kevin Eastman, Steve Englehart, Moto Hagio, Larry Hama, Jeffrey Catherine Jones, David Mazzucchelli, Jean-Claude Mézières, Grant Morrison, Gasper Saldino, Jim Shooter, Gary Trudeau, Ron Turner, George Tuska, Mark Waid, and Kat Ironroad. Sorry if I'm butchering that last name. It's not the easiest to pronounce.
No worries.
Yeah, that is quite a who's who, and a lot of people that we've covered actually on the last Comic Shop. So I guess kudos to us. Like we know talent, I guess. But yeah, Chad, you can go up first. If you were a potential judge, which four would you enshrine?
Okay, yeah, this is tough because there's so many great names on this list, and there's a handful that I'm not super involved with. So forgive me as I dismiss Jean-Claude Mézières, even though we read some Valerian, we didn't read the good stuff apparently. Or Kat Ironroad, who seems like she was a behind-the-scenes editor type person. But there are lots of great people that I'm leaving off my list. Like, I definitely think Mark Waid is a giant in the industry. I definitely think that Grant Morrison deserves recognition, and Howard Chaykin is somebody whose work I really love. I wouldn't argue their inclusion here, but my four that I would put in include Dave Mazzucchelli, who his Batman Year One is just, between that and Born Again, like, those are the best of comics. And he also gets my nod just on a personal level for Asterios Polyp. And I know Andy's sick of me talking about this. There's one page where he's in a classroom and he has all these different students, and they're all composed different ways. Like, some are jaggedy lines, and some are made out of boxes, and some are made with real big loopy doopy circles. And it changed the way that I see people in the real world. And so, like, for me, Dave Mazzucchelli is a master in the field and just so genius. So he gets my pick. Jim Shooter is another one where the heyday of Marvel, people often associate, your Stan Lees and your Jack Kirby's, and that's true. But Marvel doesn't become what it is without Jim Shooter. And whether it's things like Secret Wars or some of his Avengers stories that he wrote, or just making some of the hard decisions sometimes. So much of what I love from Marvel came out and maintained as a result of Jim Shooter. And then my number 3 is going to be Larry Hama. I'm a huge G.I. Joe guy, and Hama's G.I. Joe work is just incredible. His Wolverine work is great. He's somebody who is consistent. You're going to get a good book when you have Larry Hama there. And then finally, Jerry Conway, who wrote some of the first Spider-Man stories that I read. Such a huge impact on defining the character for me. Even more so than the Stan and Steve Ditko stuff that I wouldn't get to until much later. It was Jerry Conway that helped me fall in love with Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. I love Spider-Man, and so I love those guys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't argue with your list too much. I think you got 3 out of the 4 for me as well. Like, I'll put in Dave Mazzucchelli, of course, because, again, I love Asterios Polyp. I love Year One. And then, of course, I'll put in Jerry Conway, because for the same reasons that you did. Plus, I love Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man. And he still writes good stuff, because I really enjoyed his Spider-Man Renew Your Vows. Like, that was a really great series that again, rekindled my love in Spider-Man after so many years. And then Jim Shooter Jim Shooter is actually one of my favorite comic book writers. I mean, I love his stuff on the Avengers. I love all the early Valiant stuff. Like, again, he shows like that he can build a universe. And as long as you follow the Shooter plan, things make sense and build logically to great conclusions. He knows how to run a tight ship, and so that's really hard in the comic book industry.
Yeah, and then when they canned him, then Valiant went downhill. And
Exactly.
Had to be bought by an arcade company, which also went downhill, and it was all.
I could say the same.
They're
thing
only
with
finally
Marvel.
coming back now.
Like, it's like Marvel, they canned Jim Shooter. They got rid of Jim Shooter within a decade. Like, Marvel was bankrupt. It happens. You get rid of Shooter at the helm, and like all of things start going downhill. So like that. You can't argue his influence. But I think I'm going to give the nod to Howard Chaykin over Larry Hama. I think Chaykin is just a masterful artist. Everything from, like, adaptation of Star Wars. I mean, that was the book that was keeping Marvel in the black, and he was drawing that. Then you have his stuff on Shadow, and then later on you get even some of his, American Flag, and he wrote something called American Century, if you're ever going to find that. That's a really good series. I don't know. His Hey Kids comics is just, I just like everything he's ever done in terms of at least art, for sure. J.A., who's your picks?
Yeah, I echo you both with Jim Shooter and Jerry Conway. I lean towards Jean-Claude Mézières simply for the breadth of his work and the amount and the impact globally he has had. I mean, let's not just remember that the comic book industry is not just in the United States. So, and I would be remiss if I didn't, give a little shout out to Steve Englehart. He did some of the early Silver Surfer issues, the third volume of Silver Surfer.
Oh, yeah.
Also co-created Shang-Chi and Star-Lord and Mantis. Was at Marvel in the 70s doing really good work on Hulk and Avengers and Doctor Strange and a couple of other novels.
And Captain America, too. He had the Secret Empire original story. He's like, if I get 5, he's in there. And
his Batman run with Marshall Rogers. Oh, so good.
He's just knocking at the door, just like
there's so many. That's what makes it so hard. I do want to point out, though, no one calling out my boy Gary Trudeau. What's up with that?
Oh, all due respect to Gary Trudeau. Like, no. Like, Doonesbury, I don't want to say it didn't belong on the Sunday Funny pages, but it was never the best thing there. It
won a Pulitzer.
It was never better than Calvin and Hobbes or Far Side or Peanuts. Like, maybe it beats Hagar the Horrible. What's that? The Foxtrot kids with the big heads and the.
See, I will say that every single time I saw Doonesbury, I just kept on thinking, is this Bloom County except not as funny?
Yeah,
it seems like it's the same.
It's not as good.
Guy, like, I don't know. It was like this close to being Shoe.
Yeah, it's better than Kathy.
Wow.
Shots fired.
Off the bow. Any case.
Wow! Whatever Kathy
would
say.
Before the last comic shop, right after these commercial breaks, we're going to get into Legion of Superheroes, the Great Darkness Saga. So stick around for that.
When you're done listening to this podcast, check out mine. My name is Dave, and I'm the host of Beer in Front. My podcast is just enjoying the beer that's in front of you. Sometimes we forget about a classic beer while we focus on the new trendy thing. What I try to do each week is to enjoy an old school classic or have a beer that has potential to be a classic. I'll also talk about events of the day, I'll add my spin to things, and each week there are people that really annoy me, and I'll call them out as the jag-off of the week. That's Beer in Front, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Greetings, henchmen and loyal subjects. I am Evan the Great.
I'm JVD. We're your hosts of the Fictional Battle Podcast, Crossover Collision, brought to you by the Villains Demand.
If you love hearing in-depth breakdowns of your favorite characters and what they are capable of doing while fighting in random battlegrounds against other fan favorites, then this is the podcast for you.
New episodes drop every Friday wherever you listen to your favorite podcast or over on thevillain'sdemand.com.
Okay, and we're back. It's time now for the Read Pile Review. We are, as Andrew said, reading the Great Darkness Saga as nominated for review by Chad, his DC pick. And this is a classic story from DC's Legion of Superheroes. Andrew, who wrote the Great Darkness Saga?
Well, the writer was Paul Levitz, who has been with DC Comics for over 40 years in a variety of different roles. Believe it or not, he was DC's youngest ever editor. So he wrote it, and then he was paired with Keith Giffen, who has been drawing comic books ever since 1976. He started over at Marvel, illustrating The Sword and a Star, which was an obscure backup feature featuring Rocket Raccoon, which is kind of neat. But eventually jumped over to DC, where he co-created like Ambush Bug and Lobo, and he drew a lot of stuff other than Legion of Superheroes, such as like Omega Men. And eventually he went on to team up with J.M. DeMatteis on Justice League International, which is one of Chad and Mai's favorite iterations of the Justice League team.
That's the best one.
Yeah. And he was joined on artist duties by Larry Malston. But really, it's Levitz and Giffen. They're the ones that are known for all of this. And it was kind of cool because Levitz was one of those guys that like started introducing things like the Encyclopedia Galactica, make the Legion of Superhero book be more of a larger universe. You knew what planets did what, and like kind of like what they do with Star Trek. So like it kind of defined the universe that the Legion existed in, which again I think kind of reinforced to a lot of fans that they were like invested in these characters and what was going on in the universes, which is why they had such a rabid fan base.
Okay, and Chad, give us the 10-cent synopsis, but also tell us a little bit about what is Legion of Superheroes for somebody who might not know.
So there you go. The Legion of Superheroes is a group of younger, I don't know if they're necessarily teens per se, but they are living in the 30th century. It was like 2980 something or so is when the Legion lived. And so you have a group that has a bajillion members. They all have silly names and silly powers, and some might be a bouncing boy and Dream Girl, or I don't know. They all have dumb names. But anyway, so you have a lot of Legion-y characters. At a certain point, the shadowy figures show up and just start handing them their butts. And basically every Legion character, up until the point when this was published in like 1982, makes an appearance in this story. And for the Legion, if you talk to the Legion faithful, they'll point to this as one of the best Legion stories. But it's all about the Legion getting their butts kicked until we get to the end and the big bad guy is revealed. And it's very sad because they give the spoiler away on the cover. It's Darkseid. And it's the remnants of the new gods that have been reawakened for this big giant battle. And it's lots of soap opera fun.
There you go. Yeah, just to give a little bit more background around the Legion of Superheroes for those folks, they originally started in 1958, and they actually had quite a lot of different writers. Like, again, we talked about Jim Shooter. Actually, Jim Shooter got his start in comic books, I think at the tender age of 14, when he basically wrote to Mort Weisinger, who was running DC at the time, and said, I would like to write for Legion of Superheroes. And his story was so good. It's this one about Pharaoh Lad and all this other stuff. And he introduced like the Fatal Five, which for Legion, that's their main bad guys.
Legionnaires.
That's right.
One thing that Chad failed to mention in his 10-cent synopsis is during this whole Great Darkness Saga, underlying it is a campaign and election for the next Legion of Superheroes leader.
That's true. You get office politics.
And everybody scoffs at Dream Girl.
There's the names are pretty shocking. Invisible Kid, Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, Lightning Lad, Shadow Lass.
Karate Kid's in there. Pre-Ralph Macchio.
But again, Legionnaires, they love this stuff. They eat it up. And Paul Levitz, as I mentioned before, he really did create kind of a universe in which the build-up to this event and everything that's going on, like I think right before this, there's a character called Chameleon Boy, led some sort of suicide mission and went against, I don't know, the Galactic Charters and all this other stuff.
He went against the United Planets or whatever it's called here.
Right, and his dad is actually the guy that created the Legion, but you didn't know that because he's also a chameleon dude. I don't know. It's a lot of soap opera, and I can see how like folks would love this because in a very similar vein, this is the exact same stuff that Chris Claremont was doing with the X-Men. And eventually, like, again, what Marv Wolfman and George Perez did with Teen Titans. Like, it's the same thing. It's a collection of young adults that have, like, not only superpowers, but you have a lot of soap opera intrigue where stories build on stories, and there's love affairs, like, is Timberwolf and Saturn Girl, even though Saturn Girl is married to Lightning Lad, are they going to have an affair? And you get all that stuff. So I thought it was fun. What do you guys think?
Absolutely. And I will say, too, up to this point, I've given the book a little bit of grief. I don't know if you could tell. But this was going head-to-head with the X-Men in terms of popularity at the time that it was being published. This was just like tuning into episode 674 of a soap opera. And you're coming into all these subplots. You're coming into all this different character development. And the one big critique that I would have, and this is my critique anytime I've attempted to pick up Legion, is they don't make it easy for you. They don't tell you who the characters are. You don't know whenever they're dealing with Dollar General Doctor Strange, who the heck that guy is and how he's one of their enemies. And, you know, he's part of the Fatal Five, I guess. I don't know. And there's so many characters they throw out at you. The Legion of Substitute Heroes pop up in this story. But it is very much so like the Claremont X-Men, where it's that soap opera. And boy, had I been in for episodes 670 to 685 to, you know, whatever, started there and got into this, I would have loved this story. And I still think it's really good. It's really fun. The art is great. And I think this was one of the first times that Darkseid appeared outside of the Jack Kirby verse.
Yes.
The Fourth World. And like this story establishes him as not just the New God's enemy, but the enemy of the DC universe. It was intriguing. And if I had the time to keep going with this stuff, and I knew that it was all just as good, I would. But my problem is, this is the best of the Legion, based on the people that care about the Legion. So if this is as good as it gets, this was fun, but I'm done with Legion now. Jay, what do you think?
The biggest problem I had was I didn't know what anyone did. The names were a bit kooky. And then Invisible Kid, probably the most aptly named character, he does something, and then he disappears for like 4 issues, and then he comes back. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. He's back now, and he's doing something again. Because for the last 3 issues, he's been invisible.
Yeah, he's supposed to be your audience in. So once he gets the audience in, he's out.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that he became like me. It was invisible. It wasn't the easiest to follow. Not unlike, you know, diving into some of the, you know, Claremont X-Men in the 70s and the 80s. That being said, at least the Claremont X-Men, you only had to worry about 5 or 6 or 7 X-Men, not a cajillion different legions. They just coming out from everywhere.
They're all here.
And they're all a lad or a lass or a boy or a girl.
Well, I will say this, that it does help in terms of continuity to just have Superboy here. He is Superboy from the past, and he's brought forward into the future and all this other stuff. It's a lot of stuff they got rid of in Crisis of Infinite Earths. They were like, no. Superman doesn't do this anymore. We have to get rid of Superboy. But for this, he doesn't even really look like a boy. He looks like Superman. So you're just like, okay, I got Superman. At least I know who that character is. And so when you have him, and then you have Darkseid, who I know at the time, Darkseid wasn't anything. He was a New Gods throwaway. He showed up in a couple issues. Now he's like the biggest villain that DC has, other than maybe Lex Luthor and the Joker. And I thought it was like really super interesting with all like the evil clones that Darkseid was creating. I was trying to figure out who they were. And I was like, oh, that's definitely Orion. Like, I've read New Gods. I know who that is. And
the Mr. Miracle guy?
Yeah. I didn't know who the big brain dude was, and it turns out he was nobody. But still, for a little while, I was like, ooh, who's that guy? Like, I want to find out who that guy is, because he's probably somebody important. But yeah, it's amazing for me reading this series with hindsight, right? Like now, again, like I said, Superman and Darkseid, they fight all the time nowadays. But back then, the notion of putting the Kryptonian versus the Master of Apocalypse against each other, that was novel. Like, nobody had done that before. That's original for the time. Now it's, like, commonplace.
Oh, yeah. Well, even, like, I think of, like, pro wrestling parlance, where it's like, they build this guy up. They feed him all these Jobber Legion guys, like, whatever Welder Face is, Fire Guy, like...
Wildfire! You didn't like Wildfire?
Yeah, until they just dispatch him.
No. He's just his containment suit, because he's just energy. Apparently, I had to look him up. He's a cool character.
Yeah, it looks cool, but I mean, they feed him all of these different Legion superheroes, and it's something that it's to be commended how much the Legion has to go through to get to Darkseid, even amidst all their internal squabbling over who's going to be the leader, and like somebody's taking charge, like, just because you're running for office, you want to get your points in. It's like, oh, geez, come on, guys, get along.
Yeah, the setup where Darkseid is sending out all his minions to collect these different elements to make him stronger. I was like, wow. I'm thinking, Paul Levitz and Keith Giffen should have gotten some sort of writing credit on the MCU Infinity Gauntlet movies, because those elements, they're not in the Infinity Gauntlet as written by Jim Starlin. That's taken from this.
Yeah. Where he goes and he's like building up his power and stuff. Darkseid is very much reminiscent of a modern day Thanos. Like, again, like, and it's, I guess it's the seeds of like how you build up a character. And boy, that scene where he uses his powers to swap the planets so that he can make like an invincible army of 3 billion super beings. And did you see that a lot of them were drawn in kind of like a Jack Kirby-esque? Their designs of their costumes look very New Gaudy, and like I think one looked almost like Thor, and I was like, that's kind of neat. I mean, they ended up being like all faceless, nameless people, of like a plague of locusts. But at the same time, it was kind of cool. Like, you really do get a sense like Darkseid cannot be stopped. How they're gonna beat this guy is beyond me, because it doesn't seem possible.
And how terrible would it be if your home planet gets replaced with Apocalypse? Like, somebody messed up all the stuff.
Yeah, but how awesome would it be is like if suddenly your home planet is in front of a yellow sun instead of a red one, and like your entire population becomes Superman.
Yeah.
You got me there.
And I will say this. I think we commented during our New Gods review, Jack Kirby is a really great artist. He really is. I love Jack Kirby art. Don't know if he's the best writer. And so it's always good when you have folks that take some of Jack Kirby's ideas and they take them somewhere else. The notion like that without this book, you really maybe wouldn't have Darkseid be a big bad in the DC universe. But Paul Levitz does such a good job of building up him as an unstoppable force that it's hard not to be like, yeah, I see he can be used in interesting ways. And then you get Highfather and Orion, and Orion and Darkseid have that big fight at the end, which is awesome.
Yeah. And I was going to say, don't undersell Keith Giffen in this, because early in his career, Keith Giffen was kind of a Jack Kirby clone. And he even busted some of that out in the New 52 when he did the OMAC story. So this is a guy that's always given credit either through, flattery and imitation, or respecting what Jack Kirby has brought to the table in terms of characters, in terms of bombast, in terms of artwork, and how things are set up. So Giffen, and I'm sure Paul Levitz too, but Giffen especially has that respect for Kirby and what Kirby had done and how innovative it really was.
Yeah, once you got past the hokey names, it just sort of felt like X-Men in space in the 30th century. It was fun. It was a fun read. It was a fun setup. The story had some nuance to it, and you had sort of this palace intrigue, office politics thing going on in the background, and this guy's had his antenna shackled so that he couldn't change because he was like arrested for treason and sent to jail for 30 years or something. I liked all that they didn't stop everything else that was going on to tell the main story. I think, that's very similar to what Claremont did with X-Men. He would have the main story, but you still have all this underlying stuff, setting up things for the future, resolving things from the past. It makes it maybe a little bit harder to approach as just a single story, but it also reminds you that these exist within a longer continuity.
Yeah, the only downside is knowing that DC totally screws up the Legion. They do one of those 5 years later kind of things where everything is destroyed and it becomes dystopian and like all the quirky stuff that the fans loved. And then they hit a big reset button and they're like, oh, that didn't work. Whoops. And they hit another reset button and whoops. And then it got to the point where that's like, Legion's not a thing.
Right. And I think it was all because of Crisis. Because, again, once Crisis hits, they were like, well, we got to do something else. We don't have Superboy. And that's an important thing. Again, Superboy is a very, very important part of the whole Legion of Superheroes deal. You really can't have Legion of Superheroes without Superboy. I enjoyed it just from that perspective. Because, like, even when I was growing up, and when I was reading Legion, they didn't have Superman in there. And I was just like, oh, I missed out on the good stuff. So I was glad to go back and read some of the good stuff.
Brainiac 5 wasn't doing it for you?
No. Although, I loved the end where evidently Brainiac 5 had a crush on Supergirl this whole time. He was
it's like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was like, she called me cute!
All right. Well, we're going to get to our ratings of the Great Darkness Saga right after these commercial breaks. So stay tuned for more of The Last Comic Shop.
Hi, this is Stig from the Modern Escapism podcast. Do you need a getaway from the real world for a few hours? To find some time to just procrastinate and forget about everything else? If you do, then the Modern Escapism podcast can help you with just that. Our goal from the start has been to distract listeners from the doldrums of real life and provide that getaway that so many of us need from time to time. Each week, we discuss what media we've been consuming, from movies, games, TVs, books, music and more. There's always something new brought to the table in hope that we can recommend something for you to enjoy. After that, we have a main topic of discussion, which we have a lot of fun with, and we always encourage listener participation for these. We discuss all kinds of things, ranging from sequels, soundtracks, D&D, nostalgia, one-hit wonders, body art, trash TV, and more. The topics are limitless. So if you like chat about media and just general silliness, then why not join myself, Gadget, Oodles, Candy and Biggie each Thursday and subscribe to the Modern Escapism podcast. You'll find us on all podcast providers, Spotify and YouTube. Let us aid with your procrastination.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop. It is now time for our rating, where we hope that you find a legion of friends that you can go to comic book shops with and maybe pick up the Great Darkness Saga and read and then rate for yourself, kind of like we did. You know, we're not the only people that can do this. Like, everybody could have a 1 out of 4 scale and sit with your friends and be like, I think it was a this. But you know what's different about us? We have a podcast where you get to hear it. And so J.A. likes to give us a 1 out of 4 scale that's unique every week. And what is our 1 out of 4 scale this week?
Well, there were tons of them, but we're going to try to reduce it to 4. 1 out of 4 Legionnaires.
Yes. See, and you like that? That's the French Foreign Legion right there. I thought that was appropriate. Any case, yeah, I guess we'll start off with Chad, since it was his pick this week. Chad, what are you going to give the Great Darkness Saga?
So, yeah, it's hard to get into. It's like picking up a soap opera, but this is just like what comics were when I was getting into comics as a kid. You know, you didn't get Batman issue 1. You got Detective Comics issue 602 and just went from there. And so, like I said, I could see, if this were Legion books I were picking up at the time, loving this series because they do a great job building up the bad. There are stakes, even though there's a bajillion Legion members. All that does is just inspire people like J.A. to Google Fire Energy Matter Boy or whatever his name is. But it gives you so many ins to love this universe. And it's sad that DC ends up screwing it up. And so Legion doesn't actually achieve its future destiny there. But no, there's so much here that is fun, but it is really hard to penetrate. And I don't know if you could help it. I don't know if having Wikipedia entries along the side listing the characters would be beneficial, because there's so many. There's so much here. And I was being facetious earlier when I said, if this is the best of the Legion, that's all I need. I'm done. But I'm kind of not, because I don't have the kind of time to deal with 6 million characters like this. There's just too much other stuff out there for me to be a Legion devotee to get the rest of it. So I'm going to give this a 3.5 Legionnaires. But the other thing I wanted to mention, too, we read this in a more modern collection that had the updated coloring. But boy, when I went back and looked at the original issues were just, there was something about it that made it so much better. Like, this is a piece of work that belongs in 1982. And having that dot coloring they did on the old style comic books, that was great. Andy, you missed out on the 16-page preview of the Masters of the Universe that shows up in Legion of Superheroes 293.
Oh.
Ironically, because it's a future story, but it belongs in 1982 on the garbage paper with the old style coloring. Like, the characters just look more imposing. It just feels more real.
All right. Jay, how many Legionnaires are you giving it?
So I'm going to come slightly down from Chad's 3.5 to 3.25 Legionnaires, and I'll tell you why. Is because at the end, in the epilogue, when Saturn Girl goes into labor, then suddenly it gets dark, and she delivers, and apparently she had twins, and one is stolen by Darkseid. It's the 30th century. They don't have ultrasound? Come on.
They refused it. They made that point. They said they didn't want the tests. And you know how things go. Everybody gets all crunchy. They want the old ways. They want the midwife.
Come on now. It was a fun book. It's not unlike what I was saying back when we reviewed the Doctor Strange movie. The reason why I liked the second Doctor Strange movie better than the first, because we didn't have the origin story to go through. Well, they don't bother with any of the origin stories. You're in the middle of it from the beginning, and I like that. And in this day and age, unlike when I was reading X-Men in the 80s and 90s, you've got Google and Wikipedia, so you can fill in the gaps if you want to fill in the gaps, or you can just be, I'm just going to read it and enjoy it. And I don't understand why Lightning Lad and Shadow Lass are fighting each other and are not happy with Saturn Girl and Invisible Boy.
What I didn't understand was Timberwolf. Timberwolf was just very confusing to me. Like, I don't know, Darkseid took his humanity or something, and I was just like, is he like Wolverine? Like, is he the Wolverine of this group, Timberwolf? Like, it makes sense if he was, but like, he doesn't.
They shared a costume.
Is he the one? Is he the one who was always angry? He was like angry at the person who was. Yes,
he was angry at Furious Yellow,
Chameleon Boy.
I think I'm gonna go with Chad as a 3.5. I really enjoyed this. I think I enjoyed it the most because I've read older Legion of Superheroes from like the Silver Age, but I didn't enjoy any of it. I was just reading it because I'm a comic book historian and I like to read sometimes old stuff like that. This I actually enjoyed. Again, you get a lot of the seeds of what you'd eventually see in the DC universe that's become commonplace, like Superman fighting Darkseid. But you got introduced to a lot of Legion superheroes that I didn't know about. Like, I didn't know about Wildfire. Like, the only ones I knew were, like, Bounce Boy, Cosmic Boy, and Saturn Girl. And they were very much in the background for the most part. I got to get all the other ones. Ultra Lad or Ultra Boy or whatever his name is. He can only use one power at a time. I didn't know that was a thing. To Jay's point, I ultimately, as I was reading this, I had my phone up at the same time, and I was looking up all the characters. And if a book makes me do that, then it wins, right? It's making me do research. It's got to be at least interesting enough that I'm like, all right, I got to find out what's going on with these people, fill in the gaps. I am kind of like with Chad, though, that like if this is the best, like I'm glad I read it, but it doesn't make me want to go read more Legion after this. I might read the Legion that leads up to this because I want to see like what builds up to this. But if this is the pinnacle, this is the Dark Phoenix saga, and why would I read anything? I mean, I don't know. But 3.5. The Keith Giffen art is great, by the way. Really, really great stuff. Just as good as the stuff that was happening at Marvel at the time with John Byrne on X-Men, just as good as the stuff that happened with Teen Titans and the late, great George Perez. Keith Giffen's stuff is wonderful. So read it for that, if nothing else. So, in any case, some other things that you should read, if nothing else, is our recommendations, because we give them to you every single show. So you might as well go out to your local comic shop and pick up some of these other books, in addition to the Great Darkness Saga, that you can find in a variety of different formats. I love the one that was done by Eagle Moss Collections. You can find it in hardback. It's a British company. They put out a bunch of these. And the version that I had not only had the Great Darkness Saga, but I also threw in an issue of Silver Age from Adventure Comics 300, which was kind of neat. Plus, they give you like some background and the story thus far. Kind of great stuff. So if you can find the Eagle Moss version. Anyways, J.A., what's your recommendation this week?
So I am recommending a 4-issue run of Silver Surfer that's been collected into a trade as well, called Silver Surfer Requiem. J. Michael Straczynski is the writer and was penciled, inked, and colored by Esad Ribic. And the art is, I'm recommending it for the story, but the art is incredible. It has the same feel as the Marvels by Alex Ross. The whole thing is painted. It's just beautiful. And basically what it is the story is Silver Surfer's dying. The skin that coats him that Galactus gave him is starting to break down, and he has a month to live. He asks Reed Richards to have a look at him and figure out what's wrong. And he says, "You're dying. There's nothing I can do. The technology that Galactus gave you is so far beyond what I could ever even create in the next 3,000 years," or something like that. And Silver Surfer, being Silver Surfer, says, "Well, a butterfly lives in a lifetime in 2 weeks, so I have 2 lifetimes to live." And then in the second issue, he encounters Spider-Man, and they have a nice little talk. Silver Surfer is about to fly away, and Spider-Man says, "Well, at least you get to fly around and experience all these things." And Silver Surfer says, "I will let you experience it. I will give you a bit of my power cosmic, and I'll let you experience it." And he says, "No, I don't want it, but give it to Mary Jane." So he gives MJ the power cosmic, and she flies all over the universe and comes back an hour later and is touched by what she's seen and everything. It's just that. It's sort of the whole story is about how do we deal with death, and how does the Silver Surfer deal with moving into the next realm of his existence and whatnot. It's wonderfully written, wonderfully touching if you're a Silver Surfer fan, and just incredibly beautiful art.
Yeah, Esad Ribic is great stuff. He did the Thor God of Thunder series, which is really great. He did a lot of the Secret Wars stuff. Anytime you can get his art, yeah.
And J. Michael Straczynski, if you give him an end point, his stories are great. But if you give him a title and just let him go,
well, he had 4 issues because he's dead at the end of the 4th one. So
that's it. I read that one. That's a great story. So, okay, well, I'll go next. And my story, also kind of a sad one, but it reminded me of the Legion because it dealt so much with interoffice politics. It is the One Star Squadron. It came out this past year by Mark Russell and Stephen Lieber. And it's basically a small business called Heroes for You, which is run by Red Tornado. And underneath Red Tornado, you have Power Girl and the Heckler and the Minuteman and a bunch of other never-wases in the superhero community that go out there, and sometimes they'll appear at parties, or sometimes they'll be security guards for an event. And they're doing this to, get basically like their Yelp reviews. And, the more stars you get, the more money you can make, that kind of stuff. But the story is a very sad one. They talk about this hero named the Gangbuster, who was this great fighter, and he was known for being able to take shots to the head and recover. He is now all used up and can't remember things and is having violent outbursts. And part of this Heroes for You program, they have an outreach thing, basically to help heroes in need. And so they start taking care of him. But while that's going on, you also have this plot where Power Girl tries to usurp Red Tornado to become the manager of Heroes for You, and then the people that own the Heroes for You are trying to sell and trying to cut costs, and there's just so much of it of terrible people being terrible. And then when you get to the tail end of the series, you get to issue 6, and there are some tragic events that have happened. But Mark Russell gives you the, hey, this is why we do this kind of stuff. This is what keeps us going. You know, it's one of those things where it's a delicate balance with the Steve Lieber art, and he throws in all those jokes that you love out of Steve Lieber art. They're going to restaurants. You have Orange Romulus. It's like the coffee shop is called Grounds for Termination. The vape store is Planet of the Vapes. And you see all these degrading things that happen to these superheroes because they need to make money for their families and to survive. And I think of The Simpsons, where Homer Simpson has the picture of Maggie, posted over his thing, and the sign originally said, like, you'll be here forever or whatever, and he blots out the letters and just do it for her. Aww. So while it is super depressing, it gives you that emotional kick at the end. It just reminds you why you care about these guys. And so One Star Squadron, Superman Service at Bizarro prices, should be out soon in trade paperback. I recommend you check it out.
All right. Well, my recommendation this week is also a recommendation that during the summertime that you check out local yard sales, because they're a great place to pick up comic books sometimes. Folks are getting rid of stuff, and sometimes comic books end up being what they're trying to get rid of. And recently I had an opportunity to pick up a great comic book that I hadn't read in decades that I found very enjoyable. So I'm going to talk about it. It is also a Silver Surfer book, keeping with the theme of cosmic-related superheroes. But this is a team-up with the Green Lantern that happened in the mid-'90s called, I think it's either called Silver Surfer Green Lantern or Green Lantern Silver Surfer Unholy Alliance. I mean, it's Unholy Alliance, whatever. And it was done by Ron Martz, with art by Daryl Banks, kind of like the precursor to the Marvel DC event that they had in the mid-'90s where the two companies fought and they sent their heroes to fight each other and stuff like that. But in this, Thanos has ripped a hole in the universe to try to get the power of Oa that was recently destroyed by Hal Jordan, also known as Parallax at the time. Basically, Parallax is trying to get the Silver Surfer to give him his power so that he can create the universe and save a lot of people in some mad quest to create a lot of stuff. And Thanos is like, yeah, I found Kyle Rayner, and he's going to let me tap into Oa so that I can destroy everything. And then Parallax and Thanos fight, and then Silver Surfer and Kyle Rayner fight, and it's pretty fun. Thanos gets to be the old-fashioned Thanos, where he's like more manipulative and like, oh, Kyle Rayner, like, I'm trying to save the universe from the evil of Parallax. Come help me. Oh, wait, it's just I wanted your power ring. Ha ha ha. And it's just fun stuff. It reminds me of the comic books I read when I was a teenager and I really enjoyed. And it's plus we've been talking about team ups all year, whether it was with the JLA Avengers or whatever. Probably can find it again in buck bins, but it's really good. I found it at a yard sale, as I said. It is Green Lantern, Silver Surfer, Unholy Alliance. It's just weird. It's just a weird title. Unholy Alliance. Like, it doesn't sound...
No, it even the way they punctuated it, it was Green Lantern, space, Silver Surfer, : Unholy Alliance.
Yeah, but it's got some great art. Daryl Banks draws just as good as Ron Lim, I think. I think he draws a great Thanos in this.
Whoa.
Yeah, no,
that's
he
high
does.
praise.
Like, J.A. should read this. It's good. It's not bad. He craps on the Green Lanterns all the time. This is a fairly decent Green Lantern story. Any case, one thing that we hope you don't crap on is The Last Comic Shop. We hope that you come back and actually listen to our shows more often, and you can do that by going out to our website, www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. It's a terrific place where you can rate, review, and subscribe to that myriad of podcasters that you can find our show on every single week. In addition to YouTube, again, it's getting to the summertime, and maybe you're, on airplanes or driving in the car somewhere but you need stuff to watch. So go out to our YouTube channel. Not only do we have a lot of our podcast available, but a lot of bonus videos unboxing of action figures and comic books, and even talks with independent comic book creators as bonus content. It's always good.
There you go. And if you want more bonus content, you can find us on the social medias like Twitter and Instagram. We're at Last Comic Shop. But you would see things like our weekly polls that Jay puts out, or what we're picking up at the comic shops, or the daily comic factoids, or Golden Age covers to tuck you in at night. There's all sorts of that and more. We're trying to start interesting discussions and having Twitter spaces on TV shows. You never know what's going to pop up, so follow us on the socials. You can find them at our website, www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com.
And also there, you've got a link to our merch store. The summer's coming, so if you need something to wear at the beach, don't go without a Last Comic Shop Beach Summer Edition t-shirt, hoodie. I don't know, maybe you need a hoodie. It gets cold at night on the beach sometimes, yeah? Depends where you are. If you're on the Jersey beach, it's horribly cold in the winter.
Yeah, especially this time. Like, people go to Delaware all the time in, like, June, and you're like, no, you got to go south. Like, it's still cold. That water's still freezing. Yeah, you need a Last Comic Shop hoodie to keep yourself warm with that beach logo so that you can definitely still be fronting about the summertime vibes.
And there's a myriad of colors available, so you can match your favorite Legionnaire.
Yeah. You want to be Lightning Lad? Get it in that yellow. You want to be Shadow Lass? Get it in black.
You want to be Wildfire? Have your t-shirt be your containment suit? Go with the orange. And after you've got your containment suits, you can always head to your local comic shop to find cool stuff. Whether it's the Great Darkness Saga, like we were talking about today, whether it was Silver Surfer Requiem or One Star Squadron, or if you couldn't find it at that yard sale, the Green Lantern Silver Surfer Unholy Alliance. All that more waits for you at your local comic shop. Don't know where your local comic shop is? Use the comic shop locator, www.comicshoplocator.com, to find one near you.
All right, and we will be back next week with more comic book reviews and recommendations. Until then, I was the host with the most, Andy Larson. I was joined by Jay Scott and Chad Smith. And remember to stay safe, stay cool, and remember, if you're a member of the Legion of Superheroes, your superhero name is just what you're good at, and the word boy or girl afterwards.
Condescension lad.
Clean the gutters boy.
Lazy no goodnick lad.
Couch potato boy.
Wash your windows kid. Grilling hamburgers lad. Wait, wrong direction friend.
Are we there yet, lass?
Lake shaver girl.
Monopoly hotel owner.
The Last Comic Shop was a 2022 Black Angus production.